everybody. This is Dean Treadway here at the Atlanta Film Festival. I'm here with Robert Machoian, the co-director of a great new movie. It's a very, very unusual movie called God Bless the Child. I want to congratulate you.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
for taking some time to talk with us.
Yeah, no problem.
I've got so many things to ask you about this film, but first I want you to sort of synopsize the film in a certain way for the audience, just so they know. I could do it, but I'm going to let you do it.
Oh, okay.
You think you can synopsize your
I
own
don't know.
movie?
I'm never that great at doing that.
It does seem like a little bit of a thing for filmmakers to boil their own movies down to, but I'm going to give you the opportunity.
Yeah,
to
it's
do
really
it.
hard. Well, God Bless the Child is really about kind of the day in life of some children, Harper being the oldest, who is kind of responsible to care for her brothers throughout the day. All the while, she knows that kind of more is going on than just a normal day.
Right. The whole film takes place in one day, and first of all, with a movie that takes place in one day, are there special challenges to that as a filmmaker?
Well, not really. I mean, for the most part, you have to think about light throughout the day. So, I mean,
That's what I was thinking.
shooting things at specific times.
Yes.
But it's not so much of a challenge because when we knew the light wasn't right, then we shot the interiors.
Okay.
And so it was a balance of like just knowing really the shooting schedule and to make sure it was appropriate. I mean, I guess with other aspects, like when we got to sunset, we didn't really shoot a lot. The scene wasn't necessarily about golden hour, but really about the sun going down. That was a bit challenging because there's only a certain number of takes you can get before the light's completely out.
Right. I would think that would have been the most difficult.
That was the most
section.
difficult, and it was a really demanding scene for both the actors because it's a very long take.
Yeah, it's the long take with
Harper and this boy
Harper
that she
and
kind of
the
has
boy.
a crush on.
Yeah.
And it's really, their dialogue is really what we were trying to capture there is that kind of intimacy that they have when you kind of, when
Sort of
two young
testing the
children
waters,
like each
yeah.
other, and also looking at women have this really interesting, or girls and women have this interesting things where sometimes they play like they don't know as much as they do, and so there was a lot of like having to
gamesmanship stuff.
yeah, and that was needed in that scene to kind of look at adolescent love and how why it exists that way, and then similarities to what still exists now when you're an adult, things you do that are very similar.
Right. Okay, so we should be clear that the kids in the movie are your kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, first of all, is this the first movie that you've done with them?
No, we had done a film, or the first film I did with Rodrigo Heddebeck, a short that we did was a film called Ellen the Astronaut, and that we shot that with Harper when she was 6 years old. And then after Elias was born and old enough, he was about 3.5, we shot another film called Charlie and the Rabbit, and that was our first film that started to... Ellen the Astronaut did really well, but Charlie and the Rabbit premiered at Sundance, so that was kind of we knew we were going to be able to start making films and be filmmakers. So we had a little bit of experience with them already.
So these were shorts, right? So
Yeah.
this is your first feature?
This is our second feature film.
Okay, but your first with the kids.
Yeah.
I know you filmed it over how long? 3 months?
Yeah, it's about 3 months.
And what did you do? Did you film every day? Did you film on the weekends? Was it one of those kind of things? Or
Yeah, well, we shot in the summer,
okay.
and then we could only shoot about 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours every day. It's really all that the kids could handle.
Right.
And then we tried to give them weekends off.
I see.
So we tried to work. Normally we just work as much as we can to get a film done, just
But you didn't want to burn the kids out.
We just knew with them just as being children, like we couldn't push them to do that. On top of they just would perform better if they weren't. The whole goal was to get them not to resent the film.
Right.
And the filmmaking process, because we knew that would be a problem as we went further on into production.
Yeah, they would be like, oh, when's this going to be done? And all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But so, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Now, it's a scripted film,
Yeah.
but there's such a sense of it being so real that it becomes almost documentary-like. I mean, does Is that a good thing for you to like hear that it feels almost like a documentary, even though it's not? It's a narrative film.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it depends on the way the person is trying to say it, obviously. But yeah, even in our first feature film, that our aesthetic is really trying to blur the line between narrative and documentary in the performances, even though they're scripted. And I do consider it a compliment when people aren't really able to tell the difference.
I certainly wasn't when we screened it at the screening committee at the Plaza a few months ago.
Yeah,
I wasn't entirely clear what it was, really.
yeah. It's definitely what we're looking for. I mean, with our first feature, we had made a short. I think this is the thing that Rodrigo and I then knew what we were doing we liked, and it was we had made a short in the called Waiting Room, and it was about my mother dying, and a lot of the short is watching my dad waiting for the mortician and the mortician coming and then moving the body, and I was really interested. We were interested in the practicality of that. Mm-hmm. And after screening, a lady came up and she said, you know, I know this can't be the case, but I have to ask the question anyways. Like, did your mom really die, and you just grabbed a camera and you filmed your mom dying? And I was like, no. She's like, okay, that would make no sense that you would do that, but it felt so much like that's what was happening. That's where I felt we were in this room with a real body being moved, and I think that really excited both Rodrigo and I to where we've realized it in our own work that we pushed that aesthetic, but then also we were able to look at it in a very complimentary way because people are, you know, they're feeling very much like they're there, and that what's happening is really happening.
Oh, I mean, your film absolutely puts you in Harper's shoes in particular.
Yeah.
The moments where she's overwhelmed with having to take care of the 4 boys, and then the moments like I love that moment where she steps out towards the end of the movie where she steps out and just gets a breath of fresh air and just a moment of silence. Just one moment of silence. Lots of very well drawn and well captured moments there.
Thank you.
Now, of course, your co-director is Rodrigo Ojeda Beck.
Yeah.
What is the separation of duties there on the set for you guys?
Well, this is probably the first film that we've ever tried to divide the duties a little bit more. Normally, we just work on our shorts. We'll work kind of, I don't know what the word is, but it's like sometimes he'll shoot, sometimes I'll shoot, and there's more fluidity. It's mainly the two of us. With this film, we worked with Rob Thomas and Kirsten Anderson helped us shoot the film, and then Laura Heberton produced it. But on our shorts, it's just the two of us. With this film, we ended up splitting the responsibilities more towards I took responsibility of the camera and did the cinematography, and then he was responsible for the sound. And then the way that we normally work in the actual scene is that somebody will take the lead on the scene. So, for example, we'll shoot a scene, then we cut, him and I go and talk about it, and then whatever changes need to be made, only one of us will actually talk to everybody else.
I see.
So that there's never two directors talking to the actors.
Yeah. Now, I know the film is scripted. Obviously, we've talked about that, but within that, how much of what the kids do is actually taken in the film? It's actually taken from their real life personalities and experience and so forth.
Yeah, they're very much in what I wanted to do. Like Larry David talked about Curb Your Enthusiasm and his character, and one of the things he said I thought was really fascinating is he's like, that's not me, that's an extreme version of me. That's like, and I really thought about that when I was co-writing it with my wife. We were thinking a lot about like what are the extreme versions of these characters and how can they play that consistently. So Elias, of course, the oldest boy, is like really aggressive, which he's not in general. But he has those aspects of him.
He does kind of take the lead a little bit.
Yeah, and so it was a mix between like taking extreme elements of their characters, but also looking at the importance of the role. I mean, Harper's the oldest daughter. She's very maternal. It was her responsibility would be to care for them. Elias is the older brother. Masculinity is a huge part of, like, he's the kind of is the masculinity, and not in real life, but his character needed to be a representation of a boy trying to become a man. And so then it kind of, and then Ari needed to be the sensitive one, the one that Harper could actually find confidence in. So it was a mix between writing very very close to who they are, but then what they needed to also be for the film.
Did they have trouble learning their lines, so to speak? I mean, how did you handle that?
Yeah,
because it's absolutely no sense that the film is written when you're watching it. It's like, that's how real it feels. It feels like absolutely like this is happening spontaneously in front of us.
Yeah, with Harper, of course, she's older, so her line, she easily memorized her lines and worked with them, and Elias as well. It was the younger kids that still couldn't read yet. So then it was a matter of telling them the things that they needed to say. And with the 3-year-old, what we found is, like, he just has to know a couple things that he needs to say. We couldn't give him long monologues, but there's a scene where he's talking about superheroes. And some of that stuff in the script-wise is he knows, it's like, we would be like, okay, Ezra, you want to be, say, Captain America, and you don't want to let your brother convince you otherwise.
I see.
So then with him, it was a little more motive-driven.
I see.
And then eventually it would be like, but then at a point, and what you guys can't hear is a lot of talking to them.
Oh, yeah, you're directing from behind the camera a little bit, and that's actually edited out.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that we taught the kids, too, which is in the pre-production, is that we taught them that, like, if we say anything, you need to wait 5 seconds before you act out any of the things we say to you.
Because we have some...
And not look at the camera. So there's a scene in there, I was saying in the Q&A, where the grape jelly is in front of Jonah when they're having breakfast. And we say, Ari, you need to move the jelly out of Jonah's way. And then you see, if you watch it paying attention, you'll see he grabs it and he moves it. But he waits. And there's a lot of that going on in the film to help them. With the younger kids, it's to help them to stay onto the script, essentially. Because, the scenes are a bit long and sometimes they'll forget. So it'll be like, remember that you say this, and then they go like, oh yeah, and then they'll say it.
A lot of the film has a kind of a very natural, almost, but also kind of a dark feel to it. Like, I mean, is it the case that the lights are cut off it's low light, whatever the reason. I'm interested in your decision to film it in the way that you did. It's. I mean, you can still see everything, but it's very...
Yeah, this projection was a little bit darker than it is overall. But it's still a representation of the home being empty.
Yeah.
And Harper is really a creator of that. Not the emptiness, but she's the only thing that is kind of bringing light. So we tried to use lights in situations where Harper had all of them together. And so we would light those scenarios. But when they're alone or isolated then they're not. There was a suggestion, of course, that maybe the power isn't working in general, but if you pay attention, you can see them.
There's that great scene where she sings sings one of the youngest child to sleep.
Yeah.
And it seems absolutely miraculous. Can you talk about that getting that shot? Because you're above.
Yeah.
They're laying in bed and you're above, and it just seems like something I've never seen in a movie before. Yeah,
that was a lot of pre-production. I had a lady get mad at me because she thought we were torturing him. If you have children, they'd have to take naps, especially when they're 1.5.
And they're fighting it.
Yeah, and they fight it. They fight it all the time. What we had done, because we knew we were going to have that scene, is that we started having Harper put Jonah down for naps months before. So she began to take the responsibility of my wife, who normally puts him down, or I put him down. So that then he got comfortable with her. And then it was a process of just, during set, we just needed to wait for his nap time. So we set everything up, and then it was time for him to take his nap. We sent Harper, we would roll camera and send Harper in. And so we did a couple takes of those, and the one in the film is just the one that was the best.
Yeah, it's a great scene. Is this the festival that's at? Well, you were at South by Southwest, right?
Yeah, we premiered at South by Southwest, and then we've been in Atlanta. Yeah.
So, well, first of all, what do you how do you think the audiences are responding to the film?
Really well. It's always a nerve-wracking thing as a filmmaker to share the film, and you just don't know. And in the editing process, you start to lose emotion or feeling for the scenes. So I was really nervous about it, but they're hitting like every mark I hoped. They like all the parts where I hoped they would find humor, they are finding it. The parts that are intense, they're very intense. And even some of the scenes, there are a couple areas that I was like, oh, these were funny, but the audience responded a lot, laughed a lot more than I anticipated them.
One of the questions that you got in the Q&A the other night was that your film doesn't really, as on a script level, doesn't actually correspond to what the script books tell you, and you had something very funny to say where you don't really respond to those books very much.
Yeah, well,
or the rules.
It's hard. I'm not good at writing that way. I've written a couple scripts that way. I can if needed. But I think I feel personally, anyways, on an independent level, you need to write the way that will allow you to write the script. I know some filmmakers that get caught up in the writing. Yeah. And I had an interesting...
It's almost like trying to complete like a math problem or something like that.
Well, one of the neat experiences I had, my brother is a musical composer, and he took a course, and they brought in a mathematician who broke down Mozart mathematically on how genius his mathematical equations were. And then at the end of it, he said, but Mozart didn't do that. I'm the person that is responsible to go and find out how brilliant this piece is mathematically, not Mozart. And that, I felt like that gave me a lot of license looking at script writing, because I didn't plan to sell it. If you plan to sell a film to Hollywood, it's very important that you follow their structure, because sometimes they get confused in the reading of the scripts. But if you know you're making it, your producer's going to read it, your producer's the one that's going to fight for the financing.
You can do whatever you want.
You write how you want it, and you're actually going to talk to your producer. I mean, in my script writing, there will be a lot of just story elements that define characters. Say there are these little stories that I know will never be in the film. They would be horrible flashbacks if they were in the film.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be in there. My producer will call and be like, "Is this in the film?" And I'm like, "No. I just need." I need Rodrigo, who I collaborate, to understand why the motives behind this scene that's happening. I need you to understand why the motives are happening. The scripts are very skeleton-oriented in themselves in general.
Yeah, they're just blueprints, really.
Yeah.
But I totally agree that more people need to make films outside of that formula, especially on an independent level, because that's one of the positives, or that's one of the benefits of working independently. And the meaning of working independently is working away from those rules.
Yeah, so, I think if more people do it, they'll make more interesting films, because they'll stop scaring themselves. I just know a lot of filmmakers that are like halfway into a script, and I'm like, you know, it's like Taxi Driver is written in 14 days. And Paul Schrader said it's essentially the movie is exactly the script that he wrote. It's like, stop getting the hang up and like get it finished. It may not be a good piece of work, and if it's not, like, let it alone. When you take a year to write a script and it's horrible, then you've wasted a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also have to wonder how close is it to what you really want to do, you know, if it's taking you that long, you know.
Yeah, I think the time that should be spent in script writing, for me anyways, is always the research. If you want to write about something that you don't know a lot about, then you should spend the time researching. More time researching than writing.
Now, let me ask you this. Was your film like actually filmed? What was the house that it takes place in? Is that your house?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah, again.
So did you is it redressed and everything so to kind of reflect a...
Yeah, very much is. We built, Harper's whole room was set designed. Harper and my wife set designed the whole room, and the whole boys' room was redone over. It was really built to, I mean, art design is just another way to communicate as a medium, so we set dressed everything in that film, which was important to my wife because she didn't want people to think we have a really messy house. she had a real problem with it overall on production. She's like, everyone's gonna think we're sloppy people, and I'm like, it's a movie, come on.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, our house we had access to. I mean, those are as an independent filmmaker.
You gotta use what you have.
I try and figure out what we have access to, how long we can have access to it, because those are both fine. You know, if we can get those for nothing, those are huge financial savings, and it allows us to make a film the way we want to.
Now, I have to ask you, I'm such a movie geek, I have to ask you a question about like some of your influences, some of your favorite films, because I love talking about movies.
Yeah.
Just in general. So can you talk about some of the movies that you love? Not only movies that may have influenced you for the making of this movie, but just movies that you love as well. You know?
Yeah, probably one of my favorite films that I continually go back to is Two Lane Blacktop. Which is
Monty Hellman.
Yeah, by far one of my favorite. But the contemporary guys I look at is Ulrich Siddle out of, he has his Paradise series, which is a really brilliant. Carlos Regatas is a filmmaker that I really admire as well. A lot of the work that I look at, and I'm horrible with names, but a lot of what I look at is like the early 70s. And I look at a lot of that stuff. 5 Easy Pieces, obviously great. But I try and look at a lot of that because there was a lot more liberation going on there.
Yeah.
And you also, for me, because I like cinematography, it's like you're looking at the early works of like Conrad Hall and like Wes Haskler and the others. They're learning, and that's important for me because it's harder to watch like a film by Roger Deakins and you get inspired, but can you do anything that he's doing? No, not at all. But if you go back to the early 70s and you start looking at what they are trying to figure out practicals, how to make practicals work, and so I pull a lot from that in addition to the storytelling.
Well, we always say on the show all the time that that's the golden period of filmmaking is from. I like to extend it from 1967 to 1982. I say
Okay.
I
can see that.
That's the golden, because to me, the last great 70s movie might be The Right Stuff, and that's 1983.
Yeah,
so
I could see that.
I think that's, and then, then it's...
Yeah.
Then we go into a whole other era.
Well, I guess why I look so much at that era as well is because I think we're there again.
Uh-huh.
It's like you see like Easy Rider and others, them getting access to smaller cameras, and then all of a sudden just starting to shoot and travel and shoot where they can. And like we're just, with the new 4K cameras, being able to give you such a beautiful image. I mean, that was hard. The early 2000s and mid, even 2005 was a harder time to shoot as an independent filmmaker because you had to kind of either front the money for the really expensive equipment or you had to ask your audience to excuse the bad image. And now you're like, that's not necessary.
Yeah.
That's really liberating for me. I find Rodrigo and I, it's like, now that we have the ability, now that like Kino's putting out, it's like practical bulbs that and the ASA on the cameras allows you to use practicals. It's like mind-blowing.
Okay, so you're going to continue on the festival circuit, right?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to distribution, what's going to happen then? the third marathon that you have to run.
Yeah, it's distribution. We're working on, there's a couple distributors that are really interested in the film. It's always hard with the film without named actors. That I feel like I empathize with distributors, but I also feel really confident in the film that people want to see it. So it's a matter of them finding someone that believes the same thing we believe. Otherwise, we're looking at self-distributing the film, which I think is another avenue for independent filmmakers to kind of try and figure out. Because I think there is a way that you can get your film seen, but also be able to make some money.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Another thing.
But there's
big time.
There's no one answer. It's not like, if you get your film on Netflix, then you'll make $70,000 and you'll be great. The avenues still have to be figured out.
Yeah.
So the couple of distributors that are interested, we're excited about. But if in the end they decide to pass, then we've got to look at self-distributing the film.
Well, I can't recommend the film highly enough to people. If you're at a film festival and you see God Bless the Child playing, please check it out. I think it does. I think it does require patience, the film,
Yeah.
but I think it's extremely rewarding, and a lot of it is ridiculously masterful. I think so.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you.
And for the Atlanta Film Festival and for Movie Geeks United, I'm Dean Treadway here with Robert Machoian, the director of God Bless the Child. We'll see you later.
Thank you, guys.